What is up, fellow benchwarmers? Welcome to another episode of Fantasy Benchwarmers, episode 2, second part of our draft primer. My name is JJT with Komish Eric. Hopefully, this recording is smoother as we use a different platform. Komish,
Yep.
draft is
Nice.
getting close. I'm not sure if there's. I'm pretty sure there are some leagues who have already drafted or maybe started or maybe started their offline draft or whatever. I know some leagues have started drafting already. Any leagues that has drafted from your end?
No. I've limited my leagues to our leagues, the FBW leagues. There are just a few left aside from the FBW leagues that I joined, so none of them have
So
started.
you're scaling down on.
Yeah. Well, not really because we have how many leagues in our FBW? We have 13 to 14, right? And
Yeah,
we have 6 each, and then we have the Champions League, the Invitational. So there's a lot already there.
yeah, there are actually.
But outside of that, yeah, you could say scaling down. More picky, I guess.
Because if it gets too much, I know there are a lot of managers who plays a lot of leagues as well. I know it's not maybe the 15, 14 leagues is not really extreme. I've seen managers go 20, 30 leagues on different platforms.
Mhm.
That's crazy already. And it just sucks out the fun of playing, right? Plus the strategies are not going to be as fun anymore.
Yeah. You could say
I
that.
know it sucked out the fun for you last season when you had so many leagues.
Yeah, but we have friends who have found a way to make that work.
Yeah.
Maybe really plot the schedules well because in head to head, really, quantity quantity matters, right? The number of games. So some people have done that, have been able to manage a lot of leagues because of that. But for us, sometimes it's not just the leagues. You want to play with managers who are competitive,
Yeah.
who become friends.
Yeah.
We also want those things. So uh, that's why I'm scaling it back a little bit. But I'm not. Out there looking for leagues, but sometimes there would be managers
Some
offer
offers.
fighting, so
But you're gonna be more picky right now in
yeah,
just in accepting certain invites, right?
yeah, that's
You
true.
maybe ask who are the players there. You probably won't just join all the invites out there. You want it to be more competitive. And what I like about our FBW leagues is that I've seen similar names, familiar names, and these guys, I'm happy to say they seem to be happy with how we run the leagues because they keep coming back and they really want to win our leagues. That's how competitive they are. Even the sign ups, everyone's so competitive early on. Lots of managers last year signed up really early. That's one of the benefits of joining our leagues, and it's tough to get new managers in, as I was telling you, because a lot of managers just keep signing up every year, and that's good. At the same time, it builds a nice community as well of fantasy managers, getting to know lots of competitive fantasy managers out there. Anyway, today we're going to talk about draft day. Last episode, we talked about preparations you do before the draft. What are the things that you should remember or take note or study before going into the draft? Now, you're there, right there, 5 minutes in, getting ready to draft. What are some of the things that you might want to consider as you do the draft? Are there any things that you do during that, like superstitions? Maybe let's start there. Are there any superstitions or um,
Well, there are lots of different kinds of drafts, no? Snake draft, auction draft. I guess overall, I really don't have any superstition. But the more I just feel like the more nervous I am going to the draft, the worse I do.
The more
Uh,
pressure.
the more
Actually, I think
pressure,
sometimes there's pressure of, you want to
yeah.
draft well.
But sometimes if you just let it, don't force, not forcing anything, not going to the draft, not forcing any. I'm not saying going to the draft, not preparing, and then just okay, whatever happens, happens. Not like that. Not. It's more of like when you get into the draft, not forcing yourself to pick certain players or
Yeah,
forcing yourself to do the strategy or anything. Just go with the flow, and then the preparations help. Because you already have different builds
in
prepared
mind. Yeah,
in mind, or you know which players go to certain builds. So if you somehow get to these combination of players that will be a punt something build, then you already know how to go about it. So preparation helps for
And
sure.
I think you have to have an open mind on how, if certain things don't fall your way, what's going to be your strategies there. I think a lot of managers are so, focused on what they want to do without realizing that they have to be, they have to adapt and adjust on what happens during draft day. Because on draft day, a lot of things can happen. Suddenly, this player gets drafted way early. Suddenly, this player gets drafted way too late, right? And then, since you've let's say you're trying your uh, third, fourth, fifth pick, right? And then suddenly your guy, you were expecting to get this guy because this is the guy that's usually being drafted fourth, fifth, sixth, and then suddenly he gets to the second pick, pick third, pick earlier than usual. Then what are you gonna do? That's going to be so you have to be adjust. You have to know
if
how to adjust.
if you don't join our leagues have the lottery ahead of time,
Yeah,
right? In other leagues you just know it 30 minutes before the draft. So that's one thing that helps me knowing my draft position.
yeah,
So if you don't join our leagues and you don't have lotteries pre-draft, the best situation is to get in there as early as possible. That's what I do. 30 minutes before, just go in, know my draft position, maybe do one last few mock drafts on that position because 30 minutes is a long time. You can have a little preparation first at that draft spot. Let's say fifth, sixth, as you said, and that helps. That helps the draft. That could be a superstition. I don't know. That helps the draft because you already kind of simulated your draft at the position you will be picking. So,
yeah.
so that helps.
And everything we talk about here today, combine it with what we talked about early in the first episode, the preparations you do, then you join them together. I think it's going to help you at least, get a formidable team. We can't say we'll talk. We'll probably have some mock draft. We'll try to squeeze in some mock drafts or some Q&A later on. Maybe as the drafts start to heat up, right? Because right now there's really not much drafting going on. Maybe second week of September, that's where our drafts start. Third week of September, move onward. So we're gonna
Just
show you all those drafts, or pretty much a lot of those drafts, as we do them uh, later part of this month.
just to comment on what you said. Fifth pick, and then
Yeah. So what do
suddenly,
you? Yeah. Suddenly it
uh,
gets picked
I I
earlier.
I you should never have just one player in mind at number five. You should have five players in mind at number five. That's my strategy. I never have. If you're six players in mind, you assume the worst case scenario. That's also another thing I always do. I assume the worst case scenario, and that makes it easier. If I'm number five, I have five players, then I will assume I'll get the player I don't like. No, because the players I like, it's easier to build. I know the players I want,
Yeah.
but I assume that I will get the players I don't want, and then while waiting for my pick to come, I'm already thinking how to build with that player. No, let's. I mean, this year, top seven is easy. Seven or eight is easy. Once you get to 9, 10, 11, 12, maybe there will be managers, there will be players there that are okay. But when you get to 13 and 14,
It's going to be hard.
it's just preference, taste.
Risk tolerance.
risk
maybe.
tolerance. Everybody has their own guy. So you when you're there already, just think of the player you least want. Maybe that will be the player that will drop to you, and then prepare ready in your mind how you will build around that player. That will help. That will
Yeah.
help.
Familiarity as well on player strengths.
Yeah,
This is, I guess, part of the pre-draft routine, but during the draft, at least once you know strengths of certain players, you somehow know how to build around those sets of players or the players that you get.
I
But
guess
you mentioned about, yeah,
I'll ask
go.
you a question first. During the draft, are you a noisy drafter or are you a draft
What do you mean
quiet?
noisy drafter?
I mean, you trash talk the other
No,
managers. You comment on their picks. You make
no,
jokes,
no.
or are
But
you just quiet?
no, I'm quiet. I don't, I focus on my own drafts because sometimes I go through the ranks, right? I mean, go through my ranks, go through the players. So I think maybe a round or two ahead, like, okay, I got this guy. Who will I target next? Or at least look into which players should be, and like you said, there you should have more than one option, right? So I picked certain players already. That I look at the players that I want to get next, maybe four, five, six players, and then see, and at least that's at my preparation already for the next couple of rounds, right? So that
So you
when
don't comment. You don't comment on
no,
other people. You don't mind
no, and sometimes I
mind
learned.
games.
No, I learned a couple of years ago when we did some live drafts that it's a no.
Well,
Right. I
I mean,
mean, the competitive ones, they don't want names out. That's why we stopped the, doing inviting the managers into a live draft because I don't want to police them into not saying names because sometimes when you talk, there are going to be names that's going to be thrown out there, right? Inadvertently or maybe,
yeah,
uh,
but you can comment on the players they picked already.
yeah, I don't do that though.
Yeah, yeah,
Except our auction draft.
yeah.
You know how our auction drafts go, right? You sell a
Yeah.
player, you don't like, so that you could get the player you like at a very
Yes,
low
that's
price.
part of drafts. That's mind games. Some players are good at that. That's another thing with the draft. You can maybe try to manipulate other managers if that's allowed in your drafts. There, as you said, there are drafts that people do not want that. There are more lenient ones. Maybe you try to start already your strategies during the draft. Like if there's a sleeper that you want, you will definitely not try to bring him up in any
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
Even because sometimes during draft there's conversations that happen. That
yeah.
that come
Yeah.
out just normal conversations while other people are drafting, and then
The
maybe
usual conversation
yeah,
is the
like
usual
hey,
discussion is like you will see in the chat that, oh, this guy is still available. I can't believe this guy is still available,
yes, something like that,
right? I
or
can't believe Kyrie is still available. I can't believe Brandon Miller is still available.
yeah, I'll give an example. Let's say Anthony Edwards, and then somebody will just say, well, in the course of the draft, and then somebody will say, Anthony Edwards, I watched him in the FIBA World Cup. He was like unbelievable. Just talking about Anthony Edwards, so sometimes you don't know if that person is hiking you or
Yeah,
hyping him or want to hype him because they want him to go higher so that the player they want goes down. So those are strategies. I think part of the draft. That if it's allowed, there's nothing wrong with trying to do something
yeah.
like that.
Usually, if it's like friends, long
Yeah.
time managers, who are really your close friends, some trash talk, some fooling around makes it a little more fun. Like when
Mm-hmm.
we do it in our own league, a league that's among friends, right? But usually in a public league or maybe a league that you very competitive, they don't want you to do that because once a name is thrown out there, it gets into the radar of someone who might not be thinking about that person, right?
Yes.
So it really depends on your league. We're not saying that you should do this in all drafts that you do, but again, it depends on the managers within your group or your league. You mentioned about players you like a while ago.
Yeah.
How can you stay very objective? Because I know some managers who draft based on players they like. So what they'll do is they'll reach, and maybe this is a segue to the next question: is how far are you reaching if you want to reach for a player you like?
Well,
Because sometimes you'll hear or see in the comments that, oh, that's too early for this guy. But you could understand that it might be his favorite player, or he feels like this he won't get to him it won't get to him. So how can you be objective and maybe not reach too far?
well, when you say a player you like, do you mean a player you idolize outside of fantasy?
Maybe, yes,
Because
maybe.
a player outside fantasy that you like, let's say me, I'm a Kobe Bryant fan, but uh, I think I owned him only in less than 10% of way less than 10%.
Yeah.
I am able to really separate that, but I don't have any tips for how they could do that because that's really a personal thing.
Hmm.
We could tell managers to do not just draft the player you love or idolize just because you like or idolize them. But in the end, it's their how they are. I mean, what
But
they're
how far are
capable.
you gonna reach for it?
I'm
Like, yeah,
not
you
gonna
don't draft them
no
early, but would you reach for them
no
around early, two
idolize.
rounds
We're
early?
talking idolize. Ah. Just not.
Yeah, but yeah, idolize, but they're somehow maybe fantasy friendly
Let's
as
say I
well.
like Kyrie. Let's say I like Kyrie Irving.
All
Since we're
right,
talking Kyrie Irving,
which is not a lot of
if
people
if
do.
if I don't like I
You should
don't
have given a name that's people
okay.
like.
Let's talk about LeBron. Okay,
All
LeBron.
right,
Uh,
LeBron. All right, that's a good
there will be
example.
discussions where to pick LeBron this year.
Yeah,
Some people will say third, some people will say second, third, fourth, but I'm not gonna be surprised if he's still gonna be picked top 20. There
yeah,
will be drafts where he will
yeah,
go top
for
20
sure. Yeah,
just because of his name, just because of some people who love him. Like,
the fan base.
well, if they pick him into top 20, they will lose their fantasy league. That's for sure. I'm not knocking on LeBron, but his age, the mileage, the management, the everything will not allow him to become a top 20 player. So reach. Will you reach? If I reached because I think LeBron is because I like LeBron, then no, I'll never do that. You should never do that. If you reach for LeBron because you think, you know, your analysis is that he's really going to have a top 20 season, then fine, do it. But if you ask me how far can you reach? You should never reach just because you idolize someone. And that's my take. But the other part of the question is how far can you reach for a player you like, as in fantasy terms. You feel
Hmm.
like this guy will break out. In the early rounds, that's why we have tiers in the early rounds. If he is if he is in the same tier already as the draft is, I will pick him. Let's
That's
say
a
your tier
round. It's
yeah,
the current round, right?
let's say your tier 1 is 20 players. Let's say it's 20 players. Then I don't care if it's just the third pick or the fourth pick or the fifth pick. The fact that you put that player in your tier 1 means that for you he's there. He's on the top. In the top 20. Uh
Yeah.
they're all the same for you. That's why that's your tier 1. So even if his rank in Yahoo maybe 13, 14, and you pick him third, you don't care because you already decided he's a tier 1. You already
Hmm.
decided he's part of that tier 1. So that's for others it's a reach, but for you you feel like it's the right value. That's why you have to have tiers. In the early rounds, in the early few early maybe
First three.
first 20 picks, maybe you won't feel the reach factor.
Yeah.
But as you go into the
Well,
draft, the reach will be there.
there were some somehow
Yeah.
some managers when we draft reach for, especially at the latter part maybe of the first round. There's a lot of players there. I don't think you consider them tier one already, or I mean, I'm not sure how you tier the players, but uh, towards the latter part of the first round, there'll be there are going to be people who's going to reach. Anthony Edwards, for example, do you think he's a first round player,
Yeah,
tier one type of player
no,
at
not
this
tier one,
point?
because this year tier one is Jokic alone. That's my point.
Tier
That's my
two.
he's not even in tier two. Tier two, there are, as I said, there are around 5 to 6 players in my tier two. There are around 4 to 5 in tier
See?
three. Anthony Edwards is in my tier four. So in my tier four is already around 13 to 20. So around that range, I could pick him 13. Other managers will say that's a reach.
Yeah.
Because for
Like
other managers will say Anthony Edwards should be 19, 18, or late second,
I don't
something like that.
personally I don't like 13 for Anthony Edwards. Yeah,
But
but that's my thing.
yeah, exactly. My point is, I have him there. I can pick him 13 or 14. I might not do it. Depends on who else falls. But if I pick him 13 or 14, that's okay for me because I already decided with my own analysis that he is in that tier 4. My tier 4 is bigger, like 13 to 20, around that number of players.
All right.
So any of those
But
players,
all right, so the early rounds, I think it's crucial not to reach because the early rounds is going to be crucial because reaching could mean a big difference, right? In terms of fantasy stat set, a gap, a big gap there. But towards the later rounds, maybe the middle to the later rounds, is it okay to reach?
as the draft goes on, it's better and better. It's okay. It's more okay to reach.
Yeah,
I mean, the early rounds not as much. The middle rounds okay. The later rounds definitely. If you just follow the rankings in the latter portions of the rounds, you will lose the draft. In the middle rounds, yes, there are players, some players there that you can really reach for. Especially here is the thing: when should you reach? If you own a back to back pick, let's say 14 and 1, right? If you're the
yeah.
14, 13, 12, something there, 12, 13,
In a
14,
snake draft,
in a snake
draft.
draft, or in a 12 team league, you have 10, 11, 12, something like that, 11, 12. More or less you have to reach. It's just
Yeah,
impossible that you get exactly the players you want. The order, the if you have a list, you get players like that. Because remember, after your back to back, you will wait 20 plus uh
picks.
picks before it comes
Yeah,
back to you. So at that point, if there is really a player that's in the middle of that 20 plus, you know it will not come back to you. So if it fits your strategy, you've got to reach. You've got to reach for that
and
player.
maybe another thing is the positional scarcity that we talked about in the first episode, where
Yeah.
which rounds would have positional scarcity. Like
Yeah,
I
that's
think
one.
last episode we talked about the centers, right? And then if you see the trend wherein a lot of because sometimes if a lot of managers before you have been reaching for centers, for example, especially in a two center league, then you might have to reach for one a little
Yes.
earlier
Yeah,
than you would want because you'll run out of quality centers later on, or
that's
maybe
true.
certain categories that you're trying to build on. If you see that maybe the third round there's already scars or not many, you missed out on a player that can help your team, maybe an assist, uh, you might have to reach for a certain player by the fourth round or whatever, right? So I think that's where you also reach a bit, but you don't reach too much. I think a round is too much already. I think if 2 rounds is too much, around reach for a round away, right? Around early.
Yeah, and that's where you should understand what kind of format
That's
you're
where the
playing
mock drafts help.
and what format you're playing. Let's say roto or head to head or points league. Because if you're in a roto league, you really have to reach. If, as Jeremy said, there's a run of centers, let's say, and
Yeah,
you're in a two center league, and then let's say the Sabonis, Adebayo, Vucevic. There's 6 or 7 good centers in that third round. They all went, and you don't have a center. It's kind of gonna be hard to fill two solid centers. Plus the fact that you
yeah,
have to have a bench also of a center because you have to have a reserve. So you have to reach. That's why, to prevent that, maybe you have to, as Jeremy said, the mock drafts, the
The mock drafts
preparations
help.
of,
Yeah,
seeing that, hey, there will already be a run at this point. So when you pick before that point, maybe pick one center. Have
yeah.
one center, so that you'll be prepared. You'll not have to panic or have to reach someone 20 ranks below. Maybe you suddenly have to pick.
Because the gap is going to be huge. The gap is
Yeah,
going to be
gap is
huge.
gonna be huge.
Sometimes there are players, after the third, fourth round, the next position player who's going to be solid would be what, six, seven, 8 round type of player, which is a huge gap already from the first 4 round type of players. So yeah, reaching depends on the situation, but reaching for your idols, a no for commish, maybe reaching just to get certain position players is okay. It really depends on situation. So that's why you have to prepare early, right? In
Um,
terms of
since we're talking about reaching, no, in the when you're past 100, actually even earlier than that, for me there's no more reach. No, there will not be something that's considered a reach. That is my belief, because rankings after 100, it's just totally, a lot of guesswork.
yeah, yeah, and,
So
and it's not as painful maybe if you make a mistake,
yes, at that
right?
point,
Reach for a player, and then if you make a mistake, then you just
when we
drop
say
him. It won't be
when
as
when
painful.
when when we say reach, it's because of rankings, right? Somebody fell.
Yeah, rankings or no,
Somebody,
reaching someone who hasn't
tough.
been drafted,
Yeah, and
but he's way down there, way below the current round.
I'm saying that after 100, you should not follow the rankings. You should pick players that you like, that you really like.
You can pick players that you really like.
You should, you should not follow rankings. You should not pick one. If there's a player who's 110th, and then you're picking 110th, let's say, and then the next player is 111 or 112 or whatever. It doesn't matter anymore. The ranks at 100 to 100 to 200 to 300 really. Well, of course, I mean, there are players that are really 200 rank 200, but 100 to 150 to 160,
Yeah,
they
that's because
doesn't
the
matter.
gap between them is not going to be
Yeah,
as big. But
yeah.
you mentioned about player that drops. Now let's move on. On the flip side, if a player drops, right? I think last year, um, players like Jimmy Butler has dropped, right? Chris Middleton has dropped. But well, we can't consider Middleton as a drop because he started the year injured. But those players, the risky players, and this year it looks like players like Paul George might drop, Kawhi might drop, Ja Morant might drop, of course, because of being suspended. A lot of players might drop this year. So how do
Mm.
you consider them? Like if they're not like Jimmy Butler, for example, he's really not too much on a fit maybe on your team, or but he has dropped already a round or two from what you projected or your own rankings. Do you pick him over someone that maybe fits your team a little better?
I did that. I did pick Jimmy,
I
but
did Jimmy Butler a lot last year.
last year Jimmy kept on falling, and
Yep.
I picked him in a 16 team league around 40 something.
Yeah.
And for me,
He's around
deciding
there last year.
deciding on whether to do that or not is about value, because drafting is about value. It's about getting value. If you pick someone who's 40 something and he could be a top 10 player, that's immense value. Even if you're afraid of Jimmy Butler's injuries, sudden load managing, but the value is just is so high. That's how you win.
But now
That's how
let's
you win leagues.
if you get into this situation, a player fell, Jimmy Butler fell, like you said, to the 40s, and you initially targeted a center during that round, which is like we said, it's not a lot of centers out there. How do you balance that? Do you get Jimmy Butler or do you get a center?
there's no
Right or wrong answer?
yeah, there's no one answer.
Yeah.
Because if I wanted a center, depends on who I got the first two picks, maybe. If I want a center to solidify my center position, because let's say I got a center in the
You don't
first
have a
round.
center
If
yet.
I still don't have a center, I will have to look at when my next pick is. If it's near enough and I still have some options there, yeah, I'll go ahead and pick Jimmy Butler. Number one, let's say I decide to pick Jimmy Butler and forego the center. I will think if there's what is my contingency? Which, let's say I wanted Vucevic. Let's just, for example, I wanted Vucevic. Now, what will be my contingency if Vucevic is picked? Is out of there already. Maybe, let's say, somebody like, example. This is only an example. Let's say Capella or something like that.
Yeah.
Or Nurkic. Will that work for me? Because if it does work for me, it's okay. I can live with that. Fine. Because the value is just too much on Jimmy Butler. That's how I look at it. And also, knowing the other managers also who their picks were will help. We do that.
Looking at the teams. Yeah,
Looking
yeah.
at
I sometimes look at that as well.
looking at how their teams are shaping up.
Yeah.
That's important because if you see, oh, they're all the next few picks after me, they already have centers, so there will be a big chance, this can come back to me, this player can come back to me, or something like that. So I think those are the things you have to consider if somebody falls. But again, it's value. Unless the player is somebody you already said, no matter what, you're not gonna pick. As we talked about it in the last episode,
Mm-hmm.
some players you just say no, hell no, we're not gonna pick him at all, no matter where he falls. Then that doesn't matter. But for me, I don't have those kinds of players. I have players I don't want to pick at certain positions, but if they fall far enough, I'll be okay to pick them, even if it's Zion, if it's Kawhi.
Yeah, yeah.
They're
And there are
really
a
good.
lot of those names. Like you said, Zion, Kawhi, Anthony
Paul
Davis,
George,
maybe LeBron. LeBron
may,
might be one.
might
He's in
be,
the
yeah, Paul
he's there
George.
in the yeah. Paul George, Jimmy Butler is another player who's popular there. In the drop, of course, John Morant, for example, would probably drop. How far are you gonna draft him? We don't know.
for
We'll
for
see,
for this
right?
year though, there's no one that is already injured. We do know that Ja is out for 25 games. He's the only one really there that
Yeah.
is kind of in the Jaren Jackson 2 years ago, SGA last year kind of range. So maybe there won't be as much players that will fall because of injury concerns or whatever, whatever reason.
All right. So yeah, those are some of the anything else that we missed. I think
For during the draft,
during the draft. Yeah, during the draft.
I really feel like the most important thing is the last part of the draft. The one that I told you about, the 100 plus. Have a list of
Mhm.
players there. Have a list of players.
Yeah,
I mean, not in Yahoo's list. Your list, as in write it down or whatever, or have it beside you. Around, give yourself 25 to 30 players there that you really like. Not the Jokic, not those top
so
100.
those are the easy ones.
Yes, I have those players and have some players there that if you want. Example is Tari Eason. I'm not saying I want to pick him this year, but somebody like that. Maybe like, I'm sure some people will say that, hey, I think Tari will have a breakout sophomore season. Last year when he played, he was so good, and etc. etc. So you put him in the list, and you gauge at what point after 100 you can pick him, because if like Tari, he might be there at 150, so you don't have to go pick him at 101 or 102 just because, hey, Komish said that after 100 I can just pick anyone. Yes, but be smart about it,
Yeah,
rank them also. Right.
I mean, I think the list is more important because some of the names that you're gonna put down there in the list are not the famous names, not so familiar names, right? Not everyone in your league might know them or might value them as much as you would. right? There might be some names there that you feel are gonna break out this year, or at least gonna be good this year. Yeah, there have been years wherein these players can win you league, right? I think 2 years ago, Miles Bridges helped me a lot. He was, sometimes picked outside of the 100. They're at that range, right? Under the radar. So I think there are certain players like that who's going to come up when you make your list. And it's going to be easier as well. You won't have to, because sometimes you don't have that list, you don't know who you're going to pick, and then eventually you panic, and then you get auto drafted because you were choosing taking so long to pick a player, stuff like that, and it happens during online drafts,
Yep.
right? All right, so yeah, that's it for the draft primer. So two episodes already. The first one is preparations before the draft. Now, today we talked about the draft itself. The next few episodes will be more about the depth chart before we head on to doing some actual drafts for our FBW leagues. We're gonna post them, do some commentaries, and let's see if we can get some guests in as well, like we did last year, to comment on some of the picks. So yeah, that's a fun season ahead. It's getting excited. The excitement is still not there because it's still early. I just found out that the NBA will start later this year. I mean, October, usually it's in the October 19, 18, right? This year is going to be October 24 in the US and
Yeah.
25 in Manila, right? So
23 in the US, 24 in Manila, I think.
yeah, so it's going to be a week later than the usual. So yeah, but I'm pretty sure in the next few weeks there's going to be some excitement towards the draft. As always, guys, please subscribe if you like our videos. We throw out some videos um, every now and then, every week, hopefully, because it's a busy time of the year for us. And of course, follow us on Twitter. We interact a lot more here on Twitter, just as a lot of fantasy um, resources do. FBW underscore podcast and then FBW underscore com underscore Eric. All right, that's it. We'll see you guys again in the next episode. Bye, guys.
Bye.